So just for the uninitiated, this is the kind of thing that you can expect to achieve with a normal sort of delay pedal. This is a dry sound. And we turn the delay on, we get a delayed copy of that sound playing back. Whatever the time setting is, so we can increase the time to make the gap bigger. Or reduce it. We can typically change the loudness of that delay sound compared to the dry signal, and then we've got feedback, which essentially sends the output back into the input by some degree, creating more echoes. And delays are lots of fun. You can tweak the time to get some interesting effects. But that's about it for a standard delay. We can tweak those settings by hand, but we can't automate anything. So here we have the Axis Modular LKDelay MKii set up instead. So it's set to dry at the moment, so this is the dry sound from the Westpest. If we turn this level up, this is a crossfade between dry and wet, so roughly in the middle we get 50-50. And at the top we get fully wet. So that's fully delayed sound. This also has a feature where we can lock the feedback level, either by holding this red button. So the feedback level is unaffected by this knob, or we can latch it in position to have playable feedback. So you may notice when we hold a key, nothing really happens on the sustain part of the sound, but on this particular module, we can modulate the time. That's this connection here. So if we run a LFO in, so we've got an LFO on here, we're going to run that in via this, which is an attenuator, just to bring the level down slightly. With the level set quite low, we get a subtle sort of chorusing like effect. And then we can do more crazy things if we turn it up. Alternatively, we can use a sequencer for the source instead of the triangle LFO we've got going here, and get some really crazy stuff going. That's not the synth being sequenced, that's just the output of the delay. As we can hear, this is just as it was before. We also have a fully wet output here, so if we were to split this into 2 channels on my mixer, we can get some stereo effects. So let's do that. So with long times, we're going to get a kind of panning effect. But then if we lower it down, we're going to get a kind of automatic double tracking style effect, where it's panned very quickly between left and right. Another use for this is to use the fully wet output for extra processing. So here I've got the wet sound going through the dystopia, running through its low pass filter. So that gives the dry sound more focus and pushes the delay into the distance. I've also got it running on a different channel here, so if I wanted to, I could send the delay only to a reverb. To create even more spacey sounds. So as you can see, there's a hell of a lot more we can do with this than just a standard delay. Right, so let's get stuck into the build process for this kit. I've already unbagged it a bit. The resistors and capacitors come in this little paper envelope, but the instructions recommended testing that the values written on them are actually correct, which I've done ahead of time just to shorten this video slightly. Everything's fine. So the face plate and the PCB are in this little bag, which again I've already opened just to check the size of the pads. So there's the faceplate. The reason I checked the size of the pads is because on a recent kit I struggled a bit with the transistor pads because they're incredibly small, but on this they're not actually that bad. The pads on the transistors seem to be the same size as everything else, so that's fine. I also bought some magnifying goggles just for this job. well, just for soldering in general, and that's going to help me too. So the instructions are incredibly detailed. There are actually 27 pages of instructions. Axis Modular has gone to great lengths to make sure we know what we're doing. So before we start soldering any components in, we've got a nice blanking plate. We don't need that to build the kit, but that's nice to have. It's a 1 HP blank plate. We've got a power cable here that we'll need later, and some screws. So the components that we need are just these ones. So the first job is to start soldering in resistors. Everything is shown on the diagram in the instructions just with a circle around it, so we can use that quite easily to show us where we need to be. Probably the easiest way to do this is just to start at the top of the list and work your way through. So this is resistors 1, 6, 14 and 15, and they're all 100k. Then I'm going to go down to do the next row and so on until we're finished. So there we go, there's all the resistors in. So let's get this mounted up and get some solder on. So just while my iron's warming up, I did use the goggles a bit to find the components on that, but I'm not sure it's actually any better than just doing like this with my phone on 3x zoom. This is a Galaxy S24, pretty basic phone, and it's got a decent lens on, so I'm sure the goggles will be useful for certain things, maybe for fault checking, getting it really close to my face, but don't know, I'm a bit undecided at the moment. So let's just slap some solder on. I'm just going to chop some of these legs off out of the way. Right, that's step 1 done. So they've gapped a little bit away from the circuit board, but I'm not too bothered. They're not floated right out here somewhere. They're going to be about the same level as the capacitors, so I'm just going to leave them as they are. So the next step is to put in a couple of big chunky diodes, so match the stripe to the stripe on the board, and they go here and here. So let's get those in. So can we put anything else on while we're doing this? We can do the IC sockets. So the IC sockets go here and here where the chips are. So there's a 16-pin one, which fits on this chip, I think. Oh, yeah, we need to make sure we match the notch with the notch on the board, so that way around. That tells us which way to put the chip in later. There we go. And there's a 14-pin one that goes there. The instructions recommend bending a leg over. I'm just going to tape these down. If I can find my masking tape. So I'm just going to quickly stick them, and that'll stop them from falling out when we turn it over. So as ever, I'm just going to tack a leg on each corner, and then we can check it's flush, unlike what happened with the resistors. So it definitely wasn't flush. And now it is. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but it's kind of Stylophone's fault that I started building Eurorack stuff, because they wanted to work with me on the CPM DS2 just to present it and come up with some patches and stuff. And because it's Eurorack compatible, I was like, well, I might as well bite the bullet and start building some modules and putting a kit together, putting a rack together rather, just to get the best out of it. And yeah, I've held off for a very long time, not buying an actual full rack and just buying semi-modular equipment, sort of with eventually getting into Eurorack in mind, because all that stuff is Eurorack compatible. Will come out of its enclosures and go into a case. It's not a bad way to get going, because part of the issue with Eurorack is just to get a full single voice together if you're going to go down the sort of traditional route of subtractive synthesis rather. Takes quite a long while and quite a lot of money just to get a basic synth voice put together. Far more expensive than just buying a monosynth. So going semi-modular to start with gets you a lot of what you need for a lot less money to start with. And the CPM DS2 and CPM DF8 are kind of part of that idea really. You got a lot of bang for your buck. Right, so we need the 5 ceramic capacitors marked 104, so I just need to double check which ones have got 104 written on them. Yeah, 104, so I need to check all these. That's that sorted. Actually, the goggles are really useful for that particular task, so maybe I didn't waste my money on these things. So we need to be in C15, 14, 4 and 5, which are there, and C10, which is at the bottom somewhere. There we go, down there. Just while we're waiting for it to cool down, there's one more ceramic capacitor. It is C18. And it goes there. C21 is a 10 nanofarad box capacitor, and it goes on the other side of the board. No, this side, sorry. Right. There's just one. The blue one. No, there's 2. 3. What have we got? So, as is often the case with this kind of thing, the instructions say they're marked 104 and they're blue, but actually they're white. And they have a different marking on them. So they say .1K63, which translates as 100 nanofarads, which is what we're looking for. So that's what these capacitors are. In this particular batch, they're white, and that goes there. And then there's 7 more of them that go in places on the other side of the board, I think. So the next step is, so it's the rest of the 100 nanofarad capacitors. And they go in 9, 6, 17 and 22, which are there. C16, which is there. C20 and C13. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. So let's take those down. The legs on these are really short, so I'm not going to try to bend them over. So quite while there's 2 different ways of marking a capacitor, I don't know. Both of them that mean 100 nanofarads. In this case, the code between the instructions and what's actually written on the component is slightly different. That's something to be aware of on this kit and also others in the future. So now we're looking for 2 1 nanofarad capacitors marked 102, and these will actually be marked 102 on my particular batch. And that's these two. They've got very faint markings on the end actually. I'm quite glad I brought these goggles. So C8, which is here, and C19, which is there. Yeah, it says green Mylar or box capacitor, 68 nanorafarads. So, okay, so this has to be the only one that's left. Oh yeah, 683. So it's 68 nanofarad capacitor. So it goes up here. So just checking things back over. This is fine. I've just noticed a slightly dodgy joint though. That joint there just wants a bit more. Sorry, this one just wants a bit more attention. So I'll put a link into the top of goggles that I bought, but I don't know, these probably aren't the best ones. Yeah, that's much better now. So I'm just going to trim these excess bits of leg off. So we need to put a couple of transistor-y looking things in. One of them is actually a power regulator. In this case, it's packaged like this, it just looks like a transistor. Whereas the actual transistor that's going in, the PNP transistor, has got slightly wider legs. That is just the package type, so make sure you check before you put these in. So this may vary. So my power regulator goes in there. So we need to just bend these legs, making sure we put the flat side, matching the flat side on the board. Otherwise it'd be the wrong way around. Just going to bend one leg out like that. There we go. So the flat side is matching the flat side on the board. And that is important. And the same with this. So this is our actual transistor. It goes here. So once again, we need to make sure that that flat section matches the flat section on the board. There we go. We're good. So one of the other things we can do is put the power socket in. I'll do that at the same time. So we've got a notch marking here. And I want to line that up with this. And I'm going to tape it down again, like we have been doing. Careful with this kind of plastic against metal power connector type component, including some others, that you don't heat it up too much. I've had legs go astray before just from getting a bit too much heat on, melting the plastic. It's usually easy to sort out, but it's worth avoiding if you can. So we're fine. I can just check at this point if that power cable still goes in, which it should do. Yeah, we're good. These are still quite small connections. I'm just going to redo that one because it's not very good. It's nice to be able to actually see things with the goggles on. So by the looks of it, the last components to go on this side of the board are 6 electrolytic capacitors. They all seem to be the same. They all seem to be 10 microfarads. You can see that on this. Just zoom in. You can see a little 10 UF. So we've got negative, which is the stripe. Oh, apologies for my fingernails, by the way. This isn't dirt. I've been painting and it's impossible to get out from underneath my fingernails. So the negative stripe goes obviously not where the positive sign is. It goes where the negative sign is, which is this little flat bit here. So that way around. So we need to make sure we get these on the right way around. The other way of working it out is that the positive side is the long leg. The negative is short, as you can see. So this kit suggests that we check the circuit over at this point. So I'm just going to zoom in. You can see on the board we've got a little ground connection. We've got a connection marked 5 volts, which is here. We've got a connection marked plus 12 and minus 12. So what it recommends doing is putting a multimeter into continuity mode. I've got this cheap one here I've had for donkey's years. I've actually got quite a few multimeters. So continuity mode means that if there's a short, we get a beep. So what we need to do is just put the black connection on ground, and we can check each one of those over. So plus 5, no beep. Plus 12, no beep. Minus 12, no beep. So that's good. It means we haven't got a short. And then what it recommends doing is connecting to a power supply, setting your multimeter to a range that will detect when the power's correct. So here I've got it on the 20 volt range in DC, and doing the same thing. So ground, this should read 5, this should read 12, and this should read minus 12. And I can't do that on camera because of the way my Eurorack is set up at the moment, but I'm going to do that off camera and see what happens. So luckily everything checked out just fine, exactly as expected. So the next thing we've got to do is put the potentiometers on this side of the board. I'm going to take all these nuts and washers off out of the way. So we just place these in position. We don't solder them yet. We have a R8, which could be either 25 or 50k, so that's at the top. That's time. We're just placing them, we're not soldering them. We have a 10k, which is mix, which is R12. And then the remaining one of these is 100k, which is the level, which goes here. And then we need to add these two. So both these have the same thing written underneath them, as we can see there. We've got B104, so these are both 100k. So let's get them both in. So it mentions it may be necessary to just make sure you trim the legs back enough so that they don't touch. But I think I've trimmed them back pretty well, so we're okay, I think. So we need to take the nut off the switch. Remove the top nut and wash it from the switch. So yeah, I've just removed 2, and I think we leave this one on by the looks of it. And that goes in here. And then we need to put the push button in, so that's this big red bad boy. Yeah, so we have a flat side which is here, and that has to match the flat side marked on the board that way. So we've got to make sure that's right way around. So we have jacks 2, we need to take all the nuts off these and install them across the bottom. So now we're at that stage, we can put the faceplate on, and this will just hold everything in place while we solder on the back. So we've just got to make sure we get this on here without knocking everything off. There we go, not bad. So it advises putting the washers and nuts on the metal potentiometers first, which makes sense because they've got little sort of grippy legs that keep everything in place. And lastly, the switch. It's a massive washer, is that right? It can't be right. So the kit doesn't actually say whether we're supposed to put this washer on. It seems a bit big, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put this on the outside, and I'm going to make sure the one underneath is wound up behind it. Just by tweaking that around. It stops the legs from getting pulled through the board too far. So that should be fine. I'm just going to put some tape on that button because that's also wanting to fall through. And I'll just keep it in place. I'm just going to solder sucker, so I've got a join there with too much solder on. So I'm just going to use a solder sucker to pull some of it off. There we go, sort that out, I'll just reflow them. Oh, come on. That's not too bad. Right. Sometimes you can just get away with passing the iron between two contacts that have joined themselves together and they just sort themselves out like that one did. Right, I'm just going to give that a visual check. Seems fine. So these are static sensitive, these chips. It's a good idea to ground yourself on something. So we need to get them in the right way around, and as ever they have a little blob which we line up with the mark on the chip socket, and we can't mix them up because they're different sizes. There we go. So we just need to put the knobs on. I think we're nearly done. So I've mentioned this many times before, but turn them down, line them up, crank them round. That seems about right to me, so shove it on. So I just need, oh, I should have tweaked up all the nuts first. Luckily there's enough room just to get my needle nose pliers under here and just tweak up those nuts, so that's not a problem. I might need to just pull this one off. There we go. Seems right to me. There we go. Okay. Let's get her in the rack and have a go. So as you can probably tell from the demo at the start of the video, everything went fine and it's working. This kit took me about an hour and 15 minutes to build, so that should give you some idea of how long it should take you. So if you want a nice delay for your Eurorack with a few extra options, have a go at the LKDelay MKii. It's also available in a pre-built form too. Thank you very much for watching. See you again. Cheers.